Good morning, Scorpions and Scorpion families. It's Miss Fitzpatrick again, and I'm here with another one of our Scorpion speakers. Today, I'm here with Mr. Jarell Green. He is the UNR Upward Bound Counseling Coordinator. Jarell, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Scorpions, I'm very excited to speak with you. As Ms. Fitzpatrick said, my name is Jarell Green. I'm our UNR Upward Bound Math Science Counselor Coordinator, and my path here was not the most orthodox. So I actually grew up in the Reno area. Some of you might be familiar with the Pepper Mill, and there's an area behind there with public housing apartments called Robin Hood. And so I grew up in Lakeview Apartments in Robin Hood. And honestly, I did not think college or education would ever be a part of my story. I grew up in a true crack house, so many of you listen to gangster rap. That was my reality. They were cooking drugs, they were selling drugs, doing all kinds of other things out of the house that I shouldn't have seen. And unfortunately, it looked like I was going to go down that path. When I got to middle school, a lot of my friends were starting to drop out. They were older than me and they were starting to do serious things like sell drugs, armed robberies, stuff like that. And one of my friends was actually shot at in a drive-by. So my mom moved us as far away as she could. We were on public housing, Section 8. Some of you know what that is. And so she found these apartments out by Reed High School and moved me out there, and I hated it. But she saved my life by doing that. So ended up going to school out there, started hanging out with different people, started making different choices, started seeing where my friends were ending up and realizing prison bids are serious things, and that I wanted no part of that. And so ended up taking school fairly serious. Didn't know how anything worked, but was fortunate enough to get to the university. And so 18-year-old kid, none of my friends or family had ever gone to college, but I felt like this was the path for me. I know I didn't want to go back to the streets. And so 2 weeks after I graduated from Reed, my mom was actually diagnosed with cancer. She ended up passing away that summer in August. And so here I am, 18 years old, nowhere to live, but faced with the option, what do I do? And so I decided I was going to take this school thing really serious. And so I did. I got to the university. I started working 3 jobs. There's lots of bathrooms here at the university. And I'd actually go into these bathrooms and I would change clothes into my different uniforms for the day. And I started doing really well. And thankfully, the right people started to notice me. And I was asked to go and speak with our state representatives in Carson City about my struggle and what it was like for other students coming from backgrounds similar to mine. And as I testified, once again, caught the attention of the right people and opened up some really cool avenues for me here at the university. I switched my major to nursing with the goal of becoming a nurse anesthesiologist. I don't like to brag, but I did really, really well. And so I won some pretty big awards where there were like 20,000 students from all over the country who applied, and I was one of 20 selected. And so flew me out to Washington, D.C., gave me a lot of money, things like that. And so graduated from the nursing program here at UNR at the top of my class, won like all the awards in the nursing program with the goal to be that nurse anesthesiologist. And so set me up with a job in the ICUs at Renown, actually. So I worked in the trauma ICU, the cardiac ICU, and the neuro ICU with the goal to get 1 year of experience, and then I could go off to nurse anesthesia school. And as I was doing that, it was amazing, literally saving people's lives. Not exaggerating when I say that, and doing some really, really amazing things and learning lots every single day and getting a pretty nice paycheck that was more than my mom ever would have dreamed of, or I would have dreamed of when I was a kid. But I didn't fully feel fulfilled. I felt like I was fortunate enough to get out of my neighborhood, but not a lot of people I cared about were. And so really felt like it was on my heart. I need to go back. I need to help others. And the only way I knew how to do that was to be a teacher, because I had a pretty amazing teacher when I was at Reed. And so ended up going to the Masters of Education program here at UNR and did some student teaching. And I was fortunate enough to be student taught by the one and only Mrs. Fitzpatrick when she was at Dilworth. And it was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved it. Her and Mrs. Peterson, that I know you're also fortunate enough to have, were able to get me to stay around at Dilworth, and was so lucky to teach alongside them for a few years and had no plans of leaving. However, the university approached me with this position, and the thing that really sold me is I would get my students for 4 full years. So rather than getting you for just 1 year, I would get you from freshman year through senior year. And our program is all about helping students get to college, and so it's awesome. Actually, this morning we're here on a Saturday for one of our Saturday sessions, but one of my students came to me and said she was selected as a Questbridge Scholar, which is huge because that means one of the 45 best universities in the country is probably going to give her a full ride scholarship. Another student of mine on Thursday was also accepted to the same program. I have one of my seniors we were talking about this morning. Does she get to go to University of Chicago or University of California, Berkeley or USC? Because that's where she was accepted. And so helping figure these things out. So I get to live out my dream. So that's my pathway of getting here.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of details in there that I kind of want to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were saying that you had kind of a rough road growing up.
Yes.
And then with your mom passing, you had to make a lot of decisions pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Did you have any mentors or role models growing up?
Absolutely. So I was really fortunate. I played sports growing up. I played football. I was lucky enough. I was playing football at school one day. A kid's dad noticed me and was like, "Hey, you want to play with a real helmet and pads?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds good." And so he's like, "Well, I need to talk with your mom." And he spoke with my mom and told her it'd be $100 at the time to play Pop Warner, and we couldn't afford it. And so he was like, "Don't worry about that. We'll get somebody to give him a scholarship. All he has to do is write in a journal." And so, I went out on a limb and did something that was uncomfortable. And so did that, but it really had a huge impact on me because now I'm playing on a team with kids whose parents are like doctors or doing things in the professional world. And it got me out of my neighborhood, which was really big. And so one of the doctors, Dr. Bigley, I remember even if his son wasn't there, he would just pick me up. And same with Anthony Archie's dad. And so those people were really big. And I didn't even realize the things they were doing just by showing me a different world. They would talk about college and stuff like that. And so planted little seeds here and there. And then when I was a junior at Reed High School, I had an amazing teacher, Mrs. Corinne O'Neill, who changed my life because rather than wondering why I was in trouble or why I was missing school and just assuming, she actually asked me. And she's like, "Hey, I noticed you're missing school a lot, but you're really smart. You have a 4.0. This doesn't add up." And so I would talk with her and I'd say, "Yeah, so my mom also had a disease called multiple sclerosis." And I'd say, "I go home and my mom's been laying on the floor for 4 hours and I got to help her up. And, she has good days, bad days. She was also bipolar." And so, started explaining to her I'm kind of the man of the house. I have things that I need to take care of. And rather than judging me, she actually was like, "Wow, this is still a really smart kid who has all this potential, but he has a lot going on. So how can I help him in terms of getting to where he needs to be?" And so those are some really big influences for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot. I think some of our students, they connect with that, right?
Absolutely.
Being the man at the house, having to take on responsibilities really young.
Exactly.
And then also having to or wanting to play sports and be active in the community. And so all those things and all those ties to the community are so important.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
So what do you do as a UNR coordinator for Upward Bound?
My job, it's very hard to describe to people. I say I change lives. That's the easiest way to encapsulate what I do because I do a little bit of everything. So like I said, we're at my Saturday session right now. I actually teach students. So I teach our juniors, but then I also work in a counseling role. So once a week, I go to my students' school. So every Tuesday, I'm at Worcester. Every Thursday, I'm at Reed. And when I'm there, it's all about them. So my students meet with me at least twice a month, and we do academic advising, but we also do life advising, right? Because you guys are in high school and things happen. And so they talk to me about life. So sometimes I'm giving dating advice, but then other times, it's the more heavy stuff like anxiety, depression. But at other times in finding the right resources for them, who can we reach out to help us with these things? But then at other times it's like, okay, all this stuff sounds good, Mr. Green. Yeah, I want to have a life like that, but I have no idea how to get there. So we build out a personal roadmap for each of our students. And that means holding them accountable. We need those people in our lives that we don't just look at the grades, but we go through every assignment and here's why this is where it is, or okay, how can we help you more? And so we do tutoring here at the university. We have tutoring hours, but I also coordinate with a lot of professionals. So I'm in charge of our math science program. So I meet with a lot of professors on campus, in particular in the math and science fields to see if we can collaborate and do things. So I have some of my students interning with professors on campus. I'm doing a big event next week with another professor on campus. I coordinate a lot of events for our students because we believe the great philosopher Wiz Khalifa, you work hard, you play hard, right? And so we do a lot of fun things as well. But then I'm also this position wants me to be pretty active with other things. So they encourage me to actually apply for the City of Sparks City Council Equity and Diversity Advisory Board that I'm a part of, and actually an organization we used to work together with, Enviolution and Project Recharge. I'm on their advisory board, and so still do things with the med school. We have a partnership with the med school here to where our students are kind of in a pipeline program with them. So I do a lot there. I work with TMCC. A lot of my students, even though they're in high school, they're taking college classes, so do a lot of stuff there. And our students actually get to live with us in the summer, non-pandemic years. This year they won't get to live here, but they'll get to be with us for a summer academy. And so building out that curriculum, or we take our students on college tours, or I'm what we call the Ledge Ed, not just for UNR, but for what we call the West Stop Nevada chapter. So working with our partners down at UNLV and some of our other schools here, like TMCC. And so what I do with that is I work with our state representatives, so like Catherine Cortez Masto and people like that in terms of advocating on behalf of our program. So there's all kinds of things that I'm doing in this job, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like awesome. It sounds like you stepped into a role that you sort of needed when you were in high school.
Absolutely,
At the high school you went to.
Yes, exactly.
What's that feel like?
It's the most humbling thing ever because I do not lose sight of the fact that it's at the high school I went to. Because when I was at Reed, this program wasn't there. So I'm really fortunate to bring the program back to Reed. But also, I would lie. I think, sometimes when people doubt you, put those chips on your shoulder. I always laugh and say, when I was a student at Reed, I wasn't good enough to get one of their scholarships, but then I ended up with quite a few that a lot of organizations thought I was good enough to get. And so it's really cool, though, to know there were a lot of students like me who, if they just would have had somebody in their lives to really, give them the advice and give them the guidance that I'm able to give my students, they could prosper. And so, right, I'm the perfect example. I was lucky to get to UNR, but now my students are going all over the place. Like the acceptances for my senior class are insane. Everywhere from like University of Washington, University of Oregon, Boise State, University of Georgia, LSU, University of Chicago, UC Berkeley. I have students at Cornell on, these $200,000 scholarships. It's really amazing. And these are kids who sat in the same desk as me, who have some of the same teachers that I had. And it's just because they were given these resources and this guidance, and they were able to unlock those opportunities that I wasn't. So it's very fulfilling for me.
So I know that our 8th graders are very familiar with Upward Bound because Ms. Reyes has been working really closely with Upward Bound. But for our 7th and 6th graders, what kind of resources or what does that look like through middle school with Upward Bound?
Yeah, so unfortunately we don't start working with the students until they get to high school. However, middle school is that perfect time to start putting together a resume that you can show us when you apply. So our program is really competitive, which is great because we change lives. And so when you're doing things like that, people take notice and they're like, hey, I want to be a part of this. And at the same time, just look at our social media feeds. Like we have a lot of fun as we do it. And so
Instagram,
Instagram, Facebook, absolutely.
Instagram,
yeah, so look up Upward Bound Nevada on Instagram. You can see the photos. I think that's a big thing for me too. Don't just hear it from my lips. Look at my students' faces. You can't fake a smile, right? And so what I would encourage you to do is if you're like, hey, some of this sounds good to me, but I don't know how any of this works. One, when you're an 8th grader and you get the opportunity to hear us present, make sure you're there that day. Make sure that whatever you need to do to get in that room, you're in that room to hear what we have to offer. And then also let us know that you're really interested. A lot of those applications come in. When I go to the middle schools, I give out, and all of our counselors, we have work cell phones. I give out my cell phone number, and those students who reach out to me and say, hey, and even some of the 6th and 7th graders that are like little brothers, sisters, or cousins, they start reaching out to me like, hey, Mr. Green, like I want to be a part of this. Like my application's coming in at this time. And I remember those things are like, one of my schools is Worcester. So a young lady didn't get into the program last year, but I kid you not, the last 4 weeks I've been at Worcester. Every single day she is there. She's like, Mr. Green, I'm just checking up. Like, I know you're probably getting sick of me by now. And I told her, hey, I actually really appreciate it. We want to see that students want it. And just like I tell the students, when I go to the middle schools, we're not looking for a perfect student. If your grades aren't perfect right now, that's okay. If you've gotten into, some behavior situations, that's okay. We're looking for those students who from this day forward are looking to be the best versions of themselves. I didn't know how to unlock the best version of myself. I know how to help you unlock the best version of you. And so if you're willing to say, yeah, I'm willing to strive for greatness. I'm willing to be better than I was yesterday. I'm really willing to give everything I have and work hard at it. Those are the students we look out for. So as you're preparing to be in that 8th grade classroom when you hear us speak, start asking yourselves those questions like, am I willing to commit? Am I willing to do more? And if that's the case, I think our program is for you.
Mr. Green, I have one last question.
Yes.
What is your advice for our Scorpions?
Oh, advice. So actually, not just my program, but any program. And like Ms. Fitzpatrick alluded to earlier, get plugged in. If you can get plugged in with a program like Upward Bound, that's awesome. If it's DFS, if it's another organization in the community, do that. As I said, what really started changing my world compared to my friends that I grew up with was the experiences. And sometimes you'll be fortunate to get the huge experiences like Upward Bound students where you go on college tours. I didn't have that. Like I said, I wasn't an Upward Bound student. It was as simple as going to dinner with different families and just hearing the conversations they had, or going to somebody's house and being like, oh, it's not like yelling and screaming and like you have food in your fridge, right? Like realizing like things can be different. It starts to open up your world, because when you're your guys' age, all you know is what you've seen, right? And that's the truth for all of us. But when you're a teenager, it's really difficult to see a lot of different things than what you've been shown. When you're older, you can start to seek out seeing different things, and you can start to build a different perspective. And so what I would encourage you to do is get out of your comfort zone and do something that is going to push you and show you something new. I firmly believe that greatness is on the outside of your comfort zone. So go look for it, and whatever that looks like, whether it's a sport, whether it's an organization, whether it's a club. And if you have passions and hobbies, don't care what your friends think. Like I'm into all kinds of stuff. Like I'm into comic books, I'm into sports, I'm into my faith. Whatever it is for you, go and find a way to connect in that. Because if you do that, I guarantee, one, you're going to be a lot happier. But then two, you're also going to experience some things that get you to think about the world differently.
Well, thank you. I think that's great advice. And I know that that's advice that you live by. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you sharing that with our Scorpions.
Yes.
Well, he's got to get back to class, but I will tell you guys that he will be on campus today. During 6th grade lunch, he'll be in the cafeteria, in the courtyard, hanging out. During 7th and 8th grade lunch, he'll be up at the basketball courts. All right, Scorpions, make it a great day.